establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious living. All other sentient beings boundless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path of liberation in all nations. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious brotherhood. All other sentient beings boundless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path for liberation in all nations. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious brotherhood.
On page 2.
Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind.
And now to the top of page 6. In the Buddha,
Dharma and Sangha most excellent. I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all other sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all other sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all other sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Gumbo tu je che demba tamje kembe tongba bo sonam yun tengya so shin deshin she la cha se lo thamba do cha de we gi ri ge we ngin sun le do shin chi tu don dam chu gi ba shi gyu cho la cha se lo do na do we lam yon thong la ba da la rap tu ne shin gi dam ba yon den den gen den la yan cha se lo do je chang chen de le na ro da mami da bo pa do je den go ka den chen den sa we la me sha Saji lama yidam chokyong la sowa dep so da ji jin ji lo gyab jen ye dhume samling gen dhape dun sum yong la kya so me gya wa do je chang pa ji den gom pe shab la do do ta do sam gyo kyo le me jin jin lo shi tu je che ninge mun ba se ne kyang sen do de do to pra jin ji lo hong o jin yu jin no chang sam pe ma gya sa thong bo la Yasen choking or drum nye pe ma june she shu da ko do kan do mang pu ko re ke ki je se da to ke jin je lo je she su so guru pe ma se de ho o min chu ge yin ge po da ne du se san je kun jing o bo ni ran sen choking on sun ton se ba za we la me shab la so wa So very good evening to all of you. Welcome back to Foundations of Vajrayana. This is a course that will take place every Wednesday up until somewhere towards the end of August. Um, I was going to say it's going to be a 9-week course on foundations of Vajrayana, except that next Wednesday, in fact, I am not going to be here, so we will have next Wednesday as a break day. And so it will be 8 classes rather than 9 classes on this particular topic. So what you heard after the opening recitations, the opening recitations is part of a convention that is well established in all Buddhist traditions. The content might be different, but all Buddhist traditions have an emphasis on the use of recitations. Sometimes these recitations are done in other languages. Here at Urban Dharma, especially in an open program like this, we tend to do most of our recitations in English. After all, a key aspect of these recitations is indeed understanding what we're saying. But I also want to add that just cognitively understand what we're saying, while really important, doesn't, cover the whole picture. So there is something about also chanting it in the language in which it was composed in, these recitations. Then, of course, to have some historical perspective, many of these recitations that might be chanted in Tibetan were at one point translated from various Indic languages. We are in many ways at the beginning of the growth and of the transmission and growth of Dharma in the West. It is said that in most of the traditional Buddhist cultures, it took about 2 centuries for Buddhism to take roots. So we are not quite yet at the 2 centuries point, but even if we say things move a lot faster these days, still, I think we have a little bit more to go. But in terms of a convention like recitations, and I would call this a convention, as in it was something established. We don't think of this as some sort of divinely ordained way of behaving or way of doing things. Rather, we see this as conventions that have arisen out of what we would call sort of the awakened state. So beings who have awakened, who have dispelled all their confusions, and therefore liberated themselves from suffering, and therefore have the capacity to facilitate other people's waking up, have come up with these conventions as a way for others to use, to undergo the purification, the training that is necessary in order to wake up. Waking up being what Buddha actually means, the one who is woken up, the awakened one. So we don't relate to these conventions as like commandments or divinely ordained, but certainly we should see how they were not. So on the one hand, they're not divinely ordained. On the other hand, they were not just willy-nilly a committee sat together and decided to put it all together. Neither did it come about this way. So as with any convention, if we don't know how to use them, then they're probably not very useful, and in fact, not necessary. But if we know how to relate to them, if we know how to use them, then they can become incredibly helpful. Then sometimes chants are done still, like in the Tibetan tradition, still done in Tibetan. Many Tibetan Buddhist centers emphasize that a lot. I think in part it has to do with the fact that the teachers of Tibetan Buddhism, majority still tend to be of Tibetan origins or of cultures where Tibetan is or a form of Tibetan, such as Ladakh, Bhutan. They have their own language, but closely related to Tibetan. So the chants all are still done in Tibetan. And largely, I would say, in part, is the situation where the Tibetan people, many of them are in exile from their homeland. And so there is a stronger sense that this is a culture under siege. And so the importance of maintaining the culture, which of course includes maintaining the language. So on the Tibetan people's side, there is a stronger push to kind of keep these chants in Tibetan. Again, I would say not because there's any kind of divine origins to the Tibetan language, but the particular situation of Tibetan people and Tibetan culture. Then on the other hand, I think if we from time to time also chant in Tibetan, if we are doing practices of Tibetan Buddhism, it is a way to recognize and to remember where this comes from. So then this includes the notion of lineage, which is an important concept, especially in Vajrayana. We'll get to it sometime in these 8 classes, the importance of lineage. And so after you did the recitation, after we all did the recitation in English, I did some recitations in Tibetan. It's basically paying homage to the Buddha, to the Dharma, and to the Sangha, and then followed by invoking the blessings of the lineage. Invoking the blessings of the lineage that says, all the way from the source of the teachings, all the way down to the person and persons that I received these teachings and lineages from, please give me your blessings. So that's the notion of lineage. Then, of course, often this can also serve to inspire perhaps some of us in this room to then say, oh, maybe I should study Tibetan. And we certainly need more people that know Tibetan in this culture, in this context, so that the transmission of Buddhism as practiced, as developed, as flourished in the Tibetan context can be more fully and more accurately and more strongly established in the West. So we have to look beyond, just like our own narrow focus. And you might think, oh, I'm, 92 already, why am I chanting in Tibetan, Well, maybe other people need to chant in Tibetan, and you can just relax, Likewise, I have people who say, like, I don't know, we should do this in Tibetan, like, why do we do this in English? Especially people who have been around for a little bit, perhaps they feel more real or more authentic if they do this in Tibetan. Likewise, I will say to those, who have those feelings, also consider that we're not here, just for our own purposes. And in these teachings, they say so much about, don't let this be just for my own purposes. So that this is how we give an offering to those words we keep saying, I'm not here for my own purposes. So that includes, not everything that takes place is going to be, significant or meaningful to you right now, or maybe even this lifetime. That's okay. we also think in terms of many, many lifetimes. I know that's a hard one, but I think people are trying too hard to think that one out. There's no way to think that one through. Simply just to say, many, many lifetimes. What that does is that it creates, in my opinion, a much larger space or field so that none of this becomes too tight, too claustrophobic. Sometimes we kind of, our view is too narrow, and then we get so bound up by, it gotta be now, if it doesn't happen now, then, it's, I don't know, like now. This is the tyranny of now. I know there's a lot of books out there, such as The Power of Now. I really love the idea of writing a book called The Power of Then. I had another title for a book which I was going to call Living the Past and Regretting the Future. I have the title, I just don't know what it's going to be about. But it's pretty good when you go to the gas station and you see, among the books that they sell is but The Power of Now. I'm glad, that people are reading this, at some random gas station. You could buy a book called The Power of Now, and I'm sure it's very beneficial for some of us to be reminded of, the need to remain present. But like anything, if we get too fixated on right now, we accidentally also feed a certain neurosis that is related to if it is not now, I'm not interested. And again, why we need to have a book called The Power of Now is because maybe we're so used to spirituality that says, just postpone everything until, whatever, right? When the second coming, the third coming, or the first coming, or next life, or, heaven or whatever. And so we're so tired of that already. Then the danger of the pendulum swinging the other way, now, then we become very impatient, And then we expect spirituality to, kind of give its fruits now, right? But if you look at spirituality throughout human cultures, I can tell you any spiritual tradition that we have seen that have, been around for a little bit, consider spirituality as a discipline, first and foremost. Right? It's a discipline. So it requires no less than what is required of an athlete who wants to do well. So it requires discipline. But we, again, I think, somewhat injured, by the association of spirituality or religion with pain and guilt. So again, understandably, then we're like, I don't want that stuff, But we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and forget that at the core of all forms of spirituality is the notion that this is a discipline. And so what that means is that some patience, some persistence, some willingness to say, I might not see the results immediately. And to help with that, the Buddhist tradition takes, will say very strongly, and that, this is not the work of one lifetime. Now, later you will hear in Vajrayana that says how this can be accomplished in one lifetime. But that is said within the background, the broader Buddhist background of saying, normally this takes 3 incalculable eons. 1 eon is already incalculable, but this is an incalculable eons. Yeah, it's like infinity add a few more zeros. Yeah, it says it takes 3 incalculable eons. In the Buddhist text, there is a way to kind of give you how many zeros, you know. But I said, you know, for me, you know, after like, you know, 4 or 5 zero, it's all kind of like, yeah, whatever. So an eon, basically infinity and add 3 more zeros, right? So you get the idea, you know. It says, normally this takes 3 incalculable eons before all confusion is dispelled, all suffering is overcome. But in Vajrayana, it says, oh, but by the way, you know, if you really practice this, it can all happen in one lifetime. Well, you know, that's what it says. And so it's like, yes, you know. Then, of course, you know, then reality seems to kind of sink in a little after you've been around for 3 years. You're like, well, 3 years have passed, you know. Where am I in this business of waking up? You know? But anyway, the Vajrayana tradition, as I've explained in the last 2 classes, when I use this vocabulary of Vajrayana here, I don't. It's not a simple equation. Vajrayana equals Tibetan Buddhism, right? If you've been here the last few classes, the last couple of classes, this should be, you know, no longer news to you. When I say Vajrayana, I mean Vajrayana as an aspect of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, of course, then to successfully practice this aspect, which is considered in the Tibetan tradition as the pinnacle of all the things that the Buddha taught. In order to practice this pinnacle, you need the foundation, the body, and then the legs. So if it is like the heart, if Vajrayana is the heart or the head, then you need all the other parts to come together before it can be effectively practiced. Right? So then we talked about Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Then, using the rubric of view, meditation, and conduct as one way, right? And the way that we're going to use in this course to, you know, have a survey of what Vajrayana practice consists of. So this week, I want to begin by addressing more directly the view, which we have done a little bit already here and there. So on page 3 of this handout is this very famous composition called The 3 Principal Aspects of the Path. This was authored by a great Tibetan Buddhist master, Je Tsongkhapa. His personal name was Losang Drakpa, who lived from 1357 to 1419. Je Tsongkhapa, or called Je Rinpoche, is the founder of the lineage of Tibetan Buddhism that the Dalai Lamas historically come from, which is the Gelugpa lineage. So Je Rinpoche Tsongkhapa is the founder of the Gelugpa tradition. This is one of his early compositions where he lays out what he calls like the 3 important elements on this path. This path that is the path to Buddha, the path to Buddhahood, the path to becoming awake. In here, in this particular composition, there is nothing explicitly from the Vajrayana context. He has kept it on what you can say the Mahayana level, although what he discusses here is necessary if one were to practice Vajrayana. But there's nothing explicitly of Vajrayana or Vajrayana vocabulary in this particular composition here. Yeah.
So, what are the three principal aspects? The three principal aspects, according to Je Rinpoche, is first is renunciation, and second is what's called bodhicitta, and third is the correct view of emptiness. So he considers these to be three indispensable elements if one were to practice the entirety of the teachings that the Buddha gave. Now, of course, for Tsongkhapa, for Tsongkhapa, it means all the teachings from Hinayana all the way to Vajrayana, all of that. So for him, if you are to practice all of them as a whole system, as a complete system, then he says you absolutely need these three key aspects. And again, there is a certain linear progression from one to the other. But once you arrive at the third, then you can say all three, becomes non-linear. But in terms of like developing a more and more profound understanding, then you do proceed from the first aspect to the second aspect, then to the third aspect. And once you get, even intellectually get these three aspects, then in actual practice, it's not like you go from like, chemistry 101 to 102, to 201. It's understood as it's a holistic approach. So if we were to take it sequentially, and already some of these ideas we have already looked at in the last two classes. So the first one is renunciation. Yeah, last week I talked about how basically at the core of renunciation is saying, that's it, it's enough. This madness that we call samsara, it's enough. I'm tired of it already. So in a way, this corresponds to the thrust and the insight of the first yana, Hinayana. Hinayana, I said, although originally it has a pejorative sense to it, but when it comes to us in this form, it's nothing pejorative about Hinayana. Hina here means focus on oneself, on the individual, which is the only place that you can start. You can't start other if you don't even understand your own problems, the source of the problems. I don't mean the proximate cause of your problems, but the distant and ultimate cause of your problems. So Buddha's teachings is not therapy in the sense of, the therapy that you see, the therapist that you see to figure out the more proximate causes of suffering. So the psychotherapist or whatever therapist that you see, please do continue. This is no substitute for that. I personally believe very strongly, please continue to see your therapist because they help you to work out the proximate, the close causes of suffering. Where the Buddha's teachings are most powerful and most effective at addressing is the distant and more importantly, ultimate cause of suffering. Sometimes I think we confuse these two. And we think, Buddhism is going to be able to, help me figure out the more temporary types of suffering that I'm experiencing. For that, I think we need to continue our therapy. We need to continue our medicine, whatever approach of medicine that you have confidence in and that is working for you. Don't give those things up. This is not, the kind of religion that says, if you go to the doctor or you go to the therapist, that means you don't have faith in what the religion is saying. We're not that tradition. But also because, recently there's so much linking Buddhist practice, with therapy, which I think, yes, is very helpful, but nonetheless, the Buddha's interest doesn't necessarily, isn't identical with doctors and therapists' interests. So it's slightly different. But anyway, so on the Hinayana level, we need to understand, like what are the distant and ultimate causes of my unhappiness and suffering, and seeing where that comes from, and seeing that there is a way to be free from that, and seeing that we can achieve that freedom. Basically, the Four Noble Truths, or what I call the Four Noble Rumors. You think of them as noble rumors so that you can go investigate and make sure that they are truths. Again, you don't come to this tradition by declaring, oh, this is the truth, without examining. And so you investigate, not just intellectually investigating in the abstract, but investigating in the face of our day-to-day things that pop up, that turn up. Is it true that grasping lies at the root of suffering? And where does grasping come from? It's a certain rigidity of the mind. And in fact, that rigidity, it doesn't matter how noble that rigidity is. As long as it is rigid, you are going to encounter some pain. Now, to not be rigid also doesn't mean wishy-washy. In fact, there were some religionists or spiritual traditions during the Buddha's time that the Buddha labeled as, he called them he had some names for some of the other groups, and you're like, what? The Buddha had names for the others? Yes, he did, but of course, we Buddhists, or I as a Buddhist will say, he didn't mean it out of being malicious, but he's pointing out, where the problem is. So then he called some, he said, those are the lukewarm types. They're just lukewarm, They never get hot, they never get cold. And they go through life with a philosophy that says, just keep everything lukewarm. He says, that's not going to solve the problem. Then he had another name for another group. He says, those are like eel wrigglers. They just wriggle themselves out of whatever, situation. Right? He says, and that approach also will not solve your problems. So the middle way is not, the lukewarm way or the eel wriggling way. The middle way is the way that transcends all rigidities. But not transcending rigidity with like fuzziness. Sometimes we think that's transcending rigidity. I'll just become fuzzy. Oh, yeah, fine. Yeah, fine. Everything's fine. Then, mistaking Buddhist practice as, a practice of becoming fuzzy to everything, that is also not the answer. But it's clarity, and clarity that comes with complete lack of rigidity. It's that kind of wisdom. Lack of rigidity in some ways is related to compassion. And compassion for self and compassion for others. But lack of rigidity also comes from a certain kind of wisdom, seeing how foolish that rigidity is. But there's an aspect of that wisdom that is also very sharp, very precise, very exact, very clear. But no rigidity. So anyway, the first level, Hinayana, is, the essence of that is to give rise to renunciation. To say, I am finished with that. At least frequently saying that for now. I am finished with that, It's like, and then 2 weeks later, you're back in the, the cheese grater hell. All right? If you were here last week. If you're not, well, too bad. You missed the best part of the whole 8 weeks. Maybe someone here will tell you the cheese grater hell later. And then these, nasty birds with iron beaks, keep turning up. And you're like, well, maybe this time it will be different. No, same. So you need to go, I am finished with that. I'm done with that. And this finish with that, it's you're going to be finished many more times before, you become Buddha. That's okay. At the very least, you have to start with going, I am finished with that. And so we say samsara cannot be fixed. Now, don't misunderstand, okay? That statement is not saying the problems of this world cannot be fixed. This world itself, per se, is not samsara. But this world under the power of confusion, that confusion is samsara. Samsara is the wander aimlessly and continuously in the state of bewilderment, in the state of confusion. So samsara is literally, in Tibetan, is translated as korwa, meaning literally the circle, korwa, because it perpetuates itself. It keeps going. So the thing is to break out of this cycle, and that's freedom. That's nirvana, is to become unbound. Second principal aspect, Jeren Rinpoche says, after understanding our own condition, our own situation, after developing a determination to be free. So if you look at the third verse on this one, you must begin by finding the determination to be free. So we have to be determined. Like, I want to be free. If you are not determined yet, then it's hard to progress into the other things that the Dharma can supposedly do for us. If we're not resolved to be free. And if you're not resolved to be free, please don't beat yourself over it. That's okay. Please go suffer a little bit more. And then when you can't stand the suffering anymore, and know that then you can put a stop to it. And then you can resolve, okay, I want to be free. I want to be free from suffering. Then this renunciation, as Jeren Rinpoche says at the bottom of page 3, yet if this renunciation is not embraced by the pure motivation of bodhicitta, then it cannot be a cause for the perfect bliss of unsurpassed awakening. So he says, actually, just wanting to be free is not going to free you. Because if that notion of freedom is still built upon this sense of, I can just do the great escape myself and ta-ta the rest of you suckers, then it's also not going to work. So he says, you need this thing called bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, in a nutshell, well, many ways of kind of expressing what bodhicitta is, but in our opening recitation, that is bodhicitta. There are many ways to phrase this bodhicitta. But in the opening recitation, all mother sentient beings, limitless, boundless like the sky, like space has no limit. There is no limit to the number of beings that exist. Then, especially those enemies who hate me. We are lucky, Most of us don't really have people whom we regard as enemies. Most of us don't have. But enemies are also in the sense of they stand in the way. You think of them as standing in the way of your obtaining whatever desire it is that you desire. So especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, those who stand in my way, who harm me. and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, meaning the state of Buddha. Then, this will be the people who pay your, phone bills, your Netflix bills, all those, those who are standing in your way. That could even include, family members, friends, all of that. Yeah. Which is to say, anything, that is standing in your way of becoming free and awake. We pray for them. So here it's not saying, you get rid of them. You say, especially for their sakes. I need to free myself from confusion. Because if I'm not freed from confusion, then I can't be much help to them, to all these beings. So that now you're working to become awake, you're working to become free. It's no longer just about your own purposes, but that it's now about all beings, for the sake of all beings. Now, for the sake of all beings, it's like, wow, that's a big claim. Like, oh, God, I don't live like that. Yeah, of course you don't live like that. If you actually live like that, you are Buddha. So it is okay if you read, and certainly when I read that, I'm going, oh, what a hypocrite. And if you feel like that, good, that means it's working. Yeah. If you go, for the sake of all beings, I'm doing this, and you feel, yes. Well, there's only two possibilities. One, you are Buddha. Two, you don't even know what you're saying. Yeah? But if you say that and you go, oh, yeesh, good. That means it's working. You're like, yeah, long way to go, but I actually do. I do subscribe to this, And so what can I do today? What can I do today? The Buddha was always very reasonable. Part of his being reasonable is his ability to see. And so we do believe this. We say the historical Buddha was very reasonable in his approach. Yeah? He was not extreme. Yeah? So he was very reasonable in his advice to others. But his reasonableness is related to, we say, his ability to see, what is most helpful to that person. Which, of course, admittedly, we don't have that power, right? We don't have the power of all-knowingness, which is one of the qualities of Buddha. We said Buddhas are all-knowing. They know everything. Buddhists, get into these real fine discussions about, well, exactly what do you mean by know everything? And so there are various ways of explaining all-knowing. We don't need to go into that now. Now we can just say, when a Buddha looks at someone, they know exactly how much to push or not to push in terms of saying something to that person. They know exactly what to say. We don't have, of course, necessarily that ability. Sometimes we might have, if we know the person really well. But if we don't know that person, it's hard to know. But nonetheless, if you look at the historical Buddha's approach, as I say, generally it's very reasonable. It's maybe summarized by this saying, which says, check your own mind, but don't disturb the mind of others. That means apply the Dharma to yourself, but don't take Dharma to go measure. Level 5. Only 2. 9. Ooh, coming close to 10. Don't do that. Or don't try to go tell the person, you should really ... In fact, the Buddha told his disciples, unless somebody asks you 3 times, you don't discuss Dharma with them. That's part of, don't disturb other people's minds. You're like, but out of compassion, shouldn't you be knocking, at every door and telling them the good news of Lord Buddha? Not this tradition. And so, like the reasonableness of the Buddha, So one time it said that he was giving some teachings, and then among the people who came was a butcher that wasn't really wanting to come and listen to the teachings, but he walked by and he was so taken by the person of the Buddha. So he sat down and he listened, And after that, he came up to the Buddha and he said, "Oh, I really like what you said, but, And Buddha said, "Oh, that's very good." And he said, "But, I feel, really difficult." And Buddha said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because, I'm a butcher, I slaughter these livestock, every day." Buddha said, "Oh, well, how about from now on, you just slaughter in the morning, not in the afternoon?" He said, "I can do that." Buddha said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So he went, and it said that he did that. What happened was like the Buddha slowly worked with this person rather than like condemn the person or make the person feel bad. The Buddha worked with that person. In another instance, it was said that his cousin was getting married, but he could also tell the time is ripe for his cousin to understand the nature of samsara. So then, like for the cousin's bachelor party, Buddha said, "Hey, come, I'll take you somewhere." The cousin said, "Ooh, okay." So it said that the Buddha miraculously took the cousin, to a divine realm. And then it said, and you can also see kind of like the shallowness of the cousin. Because, once the Buddha took the cousin to a divine realm, the cousin was like, "Whoa, who are these ladies up here?" And the Buddha said, "Well, they are the, residents of this divine realm." And he said, "Wow, beautiful." Buddha said, "Yeah, As Buddha was like, "We're not done yet." So then the Buddha took him to the next level. Even more beautiful, even more beautiful. So it goes on for a little bit. And then finally, then the Buddha brought him back down to the human reality. And then the Buddha says, "So I heard you're getting married tomorrow?" He was like, maybe not. The Buddha said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I have seen all those beautiful goddesses." Buddha said, "Well, if you follow me, they are all available." So it's sort of the Buddhist version of the 49 virgins waiting, or 52, or whatever the number. So it said that Nanda said, "Oh, okay, I'll follow you." So yeah, so then he said, "Okay, I'm not getting married tomorrow." And then it said the Buddha trained. So this is all related to bodhicitta. This is all related to bodhicitta. This is like saying, no matter where people come from, where they are at, Now, first, the commitment is to ourselves. Like our work of waking up is no longer just about ourselves. It is about for the benefit of others. Now, that doesn't mean like now you go out literally doing everything that people need you to do, because you'll be dead before you become Buddha. And you'll be dead for like 3 incalculable eons if you just go running around trying to make everybody happy. Actually not possible. The Bodhisattva vow is not the vow of bodhicitta, is not the mind of, I'm going to go make everybody happy now. Because you cannot. You will fail. Everyone's happiness and suffering can be mitigated through the intervention of others, out of their kindness, out of their compassion. But at the end, whether we suffer or we are happy depends on us. This is a core, basic Buddhist idea. And if we don't get that, then taking the Bodhisattva vow will just make you absolutely insane and crazy. because you think now I need to go save everyone and make everybody happy. So taking the bodhicitta, taking the bodhisattva vow, is not becoming a doormat. That's not going to solve your problem. It's not going to solve other people's problem. So bodhicitta is really still, it is still about, I am going to work on myself. But now, not motivated by, I need to get the hell out of here ASAP. And again, tata suckers. But because I cannot bear to see sentient beings who are kind to me as my mothers suffer without any guidance, without any understanding of how to leave this mess. So I need to, as quickly as possible, become Buddha. Then the third aspect is what he calls the correct view of emptiness. It's a rather complicated topic, but we talked about it a little already. Emptiness doesn't mean become nothing. Emptiness doesn't mean become poof, nothing. Emptiness here means, again, it's related to the lack of rigidity. Do not get caught up in relating to anything whatsoever as having essences. More importantly, our concept of self, our sense of what constitutes self. Look into that deeply. Last week I mentioned, there is a really interesting way that he puts it here. On page 4, the last paragraph or verse, where he says, when you know that appearances dispel the extreme of existence, while the extreme of nothingness is eliminated by emptiness, and you also come to know how emptiness arises, cause and effect, then you will be immune to any view entailing clinging to extremes. So here, emptiness is said to be, the correct view of emptiness is said to be what's called the middle way. The middle way that is free from the two extremes. What are the two extremes? Essentialism, or here called, is it given here? No. The extreme of existence and the extreme of nothingness. So the extreme of existence means basically what I would call essentialism, that they're essences or souls or self or unchanging things. The extreme of nihilism or emptiness, the extreme of emptiness is or of nothingness is to say nothing whatsoever matters. The middle way is the way that is free from these two extremes. So he says you need all three of these, and we're going to have down these 6 more classes to come back to some of these ideas. This is just kind of an overview. So now is a good time for us to stretch, get up and take a short break. And we have some snacks back there. There's hot water for you to make tea. We only ask that if you use a mug, please wash out your mug and put it away at the end. So let's take a break, about 10 minutes, and then we will continue.
Is it possible to simply aspire to be a bodhisattva and not aspire
Exactly, exactly. So, but no, not when all the suffering is gone. The motivation has to be until everyone is free, I will not become free. That has to be the motivation. But the way that it's going to happen is not going to be like that, because then nobody will be free. And to be free, that means to be Buddha, doesn't render you useless. What's the point of becoming Buddha? You're going to be useless. Yeah. So in fact, only a Buddha can completely and most effectively benefit others. Bodhisattvas are still caught up in some level of
Oh, I see.
confusion.
So
Yeah.
that's, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
We call them confused.
Oh yeah, they are. Still. Yes, absolutely. Very clear in the Buddhist text. Bodhisattvas still have things to purify. Otherwise, they are Buddhas.
People saying they invited the acceptance.
Yeah.
Power is
Oh,
saying no.
no. That is assuming that nirvana is a state of uselessness.
Well, not really, but I'm saying.
It is because yeah,
I'm
And-
misinterpreting it.
yeah, yes,
Well, then
yeah.
why-
Yeah.
If you're in a state of uselessness, why do they choose to turn it off?
Like I say, it's the motivation that you need to have, but not literally. You get there, you go, oh, I'm not going in.
Okay, so what they're
Yeah.
saying is they're not ready to get on the train. They get there and they're not renouncing.
They're not renouncing.
They're saying,
Yeah.
the pull for me to get back is so strong.
Yes, but it's not really going back. Once you're Buddha, there's no back and
But I
forth.
mean, bodhisattva. I'm saying
Yeah.
The bodhisattva.
But the bodhisattva needs to have a resolve that is so strong that that he or she would even make the ridiculous statement of, "I'm going to stick around."
Yes. They
Yes.
call it ridiculous, so it's humorous that they do
Yes.
this, but it's.
Not humorous, but it's great resolve. The resolve is so strong that even if it means, right, I'm going to suffer forever, I will do it.
Okay.
But in reality,
So it's a form of confusion because they should realize.
but that's not the confusion. Yeah, no, that's not the confusion. Their confusion is something else.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess
It's just saying,
I get it.
I totally get where you're getting this from, because there is writing out there that suggests that bodhisattva postpone their enlightenment.
Well,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a teaching where
Yeah.
it says, and I
Yeah.
will not.
But that's what we say, these
Is that
are
a different-
to be further interpreted. So Buddha says, the words that he says has 6 levels: interpretable or definitive, restricted to one context or applicable to all contexts. Yeah. So there's
But it's-
6
it
ways
has
of.
to be ridiculous because it causes you not to do self-involvement, aspiring to reach Buddhahood. They're saying it's
You-
possible that you're going to be so.
You
good at being-
cannot be Buddha if you're self-involved,
Right. So
because the whole point of becoming Buddha is for the benefit of
Right.
others.
So,
Yep.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I get it.
yeah.
See how that
Yeah.
confuses
Oh, no, totally. Like I said, because there's writings out there. I taught college for 10 years, and all the introduction to Buddhist courses will say this. But that's basically not understanding what exactly a Buddha is.
So,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, the bodhisattvas aren't really ready to step to
Yeah. So it's not literally.
It's not a bad thing or a good thing, it's just the reality for them.
Yes.
Some of them just say,
Yeah. No. What I'm saying is like, you need to have that kind of resolve that says, if it means that I'm going to sacrifice myself for someone's happiness, I will do it. Yeah.
and I know I have trouble with different things about compassion. I still say,
Yeah, all kinds of situations. And it's basically.
it's a difficult one.
Oh, yeah.
But I have a real problem.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't understand.
But thank you
Yes.
so much for
Yeah.
taking all that time with me.
Literally, it just means gone. What does that mean? All the commentaries, there are 8 Indian commentaries on the Heart Sutra. None of them explain that.
Well, I mean, if it's gone, then you release your attachment to
None of them
the
explain
idea
what
of
that
holding
is.
that.
Repeat 108,000 times. Yeah, none of them explain that. There are 8 existing Indian commentaries on the Heart Sutra, but none of them explain. I mean, literally, it's just
And I found
gone.
a good question.
Yeah, literally, it just means gone, totally gone. And
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I understood that it meant. I think
but you see, mantra doesn't work on what they mean.
right. Mantra works on your experience of
The experience of repeating
experiencing
it
it
for
as
many
you're
times.
trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talked about if you have the feeling of wanting to help everyone immediately because that is what has overcome you, that feel that is what's the thing to do. I had always associated that with the story of Chen Sing, and that he did that, and that it destroyed him utterly, and that the thing that
Yes.
that he was that pieced him back together, that
Yeah.
he became,
Yes.
was
Yes.
Avalokiteshvara.
Yes.
I guess just to connect that. I guess maybe another question. Does that mean that Avalokiteshvara had to come about? Was that a necessary step? That momentary, this wanting to help everything and being destroyed,
Possible.
or it's just that's a form of suffering, and suffering is everywhere.
Yeah, possible that I think part of that story is saying he was so overwhelmed by the suffering of samsara that he exploded, and then through the power of Amitabha, he was reconstituted.
Are we going to cover Amitabha?
Not necessarily.
I might look it up on
Yeah. Amitabha was his teacher.
Okay.
So his teacher reconstituted. Yes. Which is what? Sorry?
If they are already watching, they should be able to see. Sorry? Oh, here. Okay. Yeah. The next teaching I want to look at in this handout is this called Advice on Abandoning the 8 Worldly Concerns. So this is
you could say, this is on page 5. This is saying a little bit more about that renunciation, right, as the first aspect. So it says, Aho, listen well, all you fortunate, supreme disciples of excellent karma. That phrase there, right? Supreme disciples of excellent karma. What he's indicating or reminding us is that if you don't have, the excellent karma, even if a Buddha was in front of you teaching, you are not going to recognize the full import of what he or she is saying. And so this is sort of like a reminder to both, those who speak the Dharma and those who listen to the Dharma, and often we find ourselves in both roles. Again, to understand, like if whoever you're talking to, whoever you're listening from, you and that person don't have the right, karma, or we call chemistry, in a less precise expression. It cannot be forced. I remember like a time where I heard or listened to some teachings from a particular tradition, and I thought, that's kind of, give me more interesting stuff. So I kind of wandered on and to go listen to more interesting stuff, exotic stuff. But after many years of wandering around with exotic stuff, finally, I look back at those early kind of basic stuff, and I go, wow, that's really amazing. Like that's where the real stuff is. A friend, a fellow Dharma teacher, much more experienced than I am, he was saying how he observed how in the earlier days of the transmission of Tibetan Buddhism in the West, one of the most prominent teachers was Chogyam Trungpa. He has many books. And it seems like Chogyam Trungpa, based on understanding his audience, based on understanding who he was talking to, he was giving all sorts of like Vajrayana level things, which is sort of like doing things upside down, because you're supposed to begin with, like the basic stuff. So he was giving all these like Vajrayana insights and teachings, from the pinnacle to his unruly hippies, in Boulder and other such, cesspools of sin. I don't think he came to Asheville because it wasn't yet a cesspool of sin back then. Back then it was, primarily, I suppose, the home of Biltmore. Yeah. Anyway, then what happened was that then later, Chogyam Trungpa would give these like super like advanced teachings, like super secret, like really, if you're really, really committed, then you study these things. And if you go look at it, what is it? It's the Hinayana stuff. It's the ABCs, So that's some sort of skill, He understood that they were too unruly. If he were to start with ABC, they'll all just run away. It's just boring. So he started with energy and, this and that and this and that, and got them all excited. And finally, when they're all hooked, they say, okay, now 3 of this, 5 of that. That 5 can be divided into further 5. And these are the seminars that he would give on like very, like this is like the real stuff, and in a way, it is the real stuff, like the preliminaries, sort of the foundational, is what's most amazing about the Buddha's teachings, because the things that are higher up, in fact, you can see how they are not that uniquely Buddhist, because they employ techniques that are also found in other traditions. Now, not making a statement that other traditions are not so good, but simply they're not so unique to what the Buddha has to say. In fact, what he has to say on the ground level is often what's most unique about his understanding of what the problem is and what the solution is. And based on that core understanding, then he would have no fear even kind of skillfully taking things from other places and using it for Buddhist purposes, so to say. And that we can say, throughout Buddhist history, as Buddhism developed in different places and over periods of time in India, you see Buddhists like bringing in, local religious beliefs. Once the core view is clear, then there is no problem absorbing kind of elements from wherever that local situation is. And over time, this will happen here too. Anyway, these 8 worldly concerns, this song, he says, so supreme disciples of excellent karma, gain, loss, happiness and unhappiness, fame and insignificance, praise and blame. So these are the 8 worldly concerns, yeah? These are what we call the 8 worldly concerns. They're basically into 2 columns, right? 8 things, 2 columns. One is like and one is dislike. What do we like? We like gain. We like pleasure. Right? We like praise. And we like fame. What we don't like is pain, loss, blame, and defame. So these are the 8 concerns. Sometimes they're called the 8 winds, meaning that we are constantly being blown by these 8 winds. So that means we are always off-centered by these 8 winds, one way or the other. Those who cling to the duality of good and bad and feel pleasure and frustration can even be called practitioners of non-dual self-liberation, bound as they are by the chains of attachment to the 8 worldly concerns. So he's saying, even if you say you are practicing at the most basic level, which is only interested in your own freedom, if you cannot be free from the 8 concerns, then you will forever be bound. You will always be blown left and right and up and down. If somebody praises you, you get all happy. And then if somebody, blames you, you get all frustrated. This is us, I mean, this is our reality. Who doesn't want pleasure? Who wants pain? Who doesn't want fame? I mean, fame here doesn't mean like having like 50,000 likes, that kind of fame. It simply just means like a respected standing among your peers. And then the other one is defame. It's like a bad name. So here, fame. I think the word fame maybe is too strong. It's not even talking about you're a superstar. It simply means among whoever you're with, you're respected. Who doesn't want that, right? I mean, in a way, these eight things, the 2 columns, it's quite natural that we want one column and we don't want the other one. But unfortunately, in our pursuit of one and running away of the other, we get so prone, off course, out of shape, and completely lose perspective of what they are really all about. So he says, whatever happens, whether it appears to be good or bad, pleasurable or painful, is just like the 10 similes of illusion. Recognize this. So these 10 similes are things like a mirage. So you'll see a mirage and you think that there is water, but in fact it's not. It's just the heat producing this kind of. So it's referring to that. So good and bad here, it's important we understand that good and bad here is not referring to actions of like harming, stealing, lying, that there's no good or bad there. I think sometimes this gets misunderstood as, is here good and bad is talking about what you like and what you don't like. So he says you have to overcome that. So whatever you see that you like, you call good. Whatever you see that you don't like, you call bad. He says you have to see beyond these kind of superficial, dualistic, pleasurable and painful. What is that story? I don't know where that story comes from. Certainly Buddhists tell it and other people also tell it. What is it? The most recent one was actually on one of these TV things. Farmer loses a horse. Neighbor says, oh, bad luck. The farmer says, maybe. Then the horse comes back with another horse after a few days. And neighbor says, good luck. And the farmer says, maybe. Then the son, the only son, rides the horse and then breaks his leg. Neighbor says, bad luck. Farmer says, maybe. 2 weeks later, the government comes through to pick all the young men in the village to go join the military to fight a war. Neighbor says, good luck. Farmer says, maybe. Right? So all these kind of like good, bad, like, don't like. And it's just, and the thing is, like, it's not even about other people, right? There's an aspect about how we conduct ourselves that we have to be concerned about other people. Yeah, of course, But this is not even about that. This is just about, like, if you don't understand what these 8 concerns are, then you have no freedom. You're under the mercy of these two. One is pulling and one is pushing. Then you cannot be at rest. But he says, and in the state of perfection, transcending the ordinary mind and beyond words, thought, and description, rest in the expanse of the view, beyond the limitations of hope and fear. So one key aspect of what we call the view is to understand that hope and fear, like and dislike, they all originate from confusion. Because of basic confusion, then like and dislike turns up. Then more grosser levels of like or dislike, then it's become attachment and aversion. Then it becomes, possessiveness and actual ill will, and so on and so forth. And everything just magnifies and multiplies and morphs from that basic not knowing, basic confusion. Then we have this like and don't like. But to have the view is to understand that these two things, They rely on each other, like and don't like. And then look back, what you like and don't like when you were 8, what you like and don't like when you were 18, what you like and don't like when you're 28. So much energy, so much grief was invested in chasing after like and running away from dislike throughout our whole lives. So now it's saying, see the limitations of fear and hope. Take home lesson is that, of course, we can't just completely just do it like that. But at least, whatever situation that turns up tomorrow that you don't like, recognize, like, well, it's because, there's a very strong sense of what I like, then this becomes really painful. Now, again, it's not saying, you become numb. You can't tell the difference between something is tasty or not. This is not numbing your senses. This is kind of knowing that, oh, it's okay. It's okay. Good or bad. Like or don't like that is going on, Some level of like, it's okay, It's fine. Primarily so that you don't get dragged around. This advice on abandoning the 8 worldly concerns was put together by the old beggar Padma. He's referring to Pemasambhava. For a group of who is credited for being one of the key people to establish Buddhism in Tibet. Was put together by the old beggar Padma for a group of students who had repeatedly requested it. Through this, he's referring to himself. He's named Nyala Pema Dundu. This is a colophon. That's what we call it at the end, just a note. Through this, may my followers, yogis intent upon enlightenment, be free from even so much as a single thought that is deceived by the Mara of the 8 worldly concerns. Mara is the demon of the 8 worldly concerns. Mara, demon. There's a story in Chinese Buddhism in the Song Dynasty, which is around 13th century. It's a great flourishing of culture and the arts in China. And at that time, many of the lettered and cultured literati also had very strong interest in Zen meditation or Chan. That's how they're called in China. So often then, great abbots and great teachers are expected to also be men of letters, very cultured. They can talk poetry, they can talk politics, all sorts of things, with these members of the literati. So among them, there was a great government official scholar, very known figure in Chinese culture to this day. His name was Su Dongbo, one of these great literati government official figures, who was an adept, very interested in Buddhism, and did a lot of meditation. So after one Zen retreat, he had some sort of breakthrough, and he wanted a famous Zen master that lived on north of the Yangtze River. He lived in the south, and so he wanted the Zen master, the famous Zen master in the north, to kind of verify his great, progress in Zen meditation. So part of the culture of that time is that these great masters, great meditators, after some sort of kind of awakening or enlightenment experience, they would write like a verse, and send it to let other great masters kind of respond to. Yeah? So that was part of that culture. So this official wrote his kind of enlightenment experience in a 4-line verse. And he sent a messenger and said, take it to the great Zen master that lives in the north, which is north of the river, and bring back whatever he sends back. So this messenger travels for a couple of weeks up north, crossing the great Yangtze River, presents this to the Zen master. The Zen master looks at it and said, brush and ink, please. So his disciples brought brush and ink, and he wrote. But it was very short. People saw that. Normally you would write a verse in response. So he just wrote very briefly, just a moment. He folded and he said, okay, take this back to your master. So another couple of weeks of traveling. So then when Sudongpo got the message, he looked at it and he was like, pack my stuff. I need to go see this guy. So he was like huffing and puffing. So he goes all the way to the north. The Zen master was giving a teaching to his students. And he barges in and he says, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? And so the Zen master said, of what? He said, your response to my enlightenment verse. And so then the Zen master said, oh, what did I write? And so then he said, you wrote, which is basically what in English, if you don't translate it literally, it will be bullshit. But literally, it's like farting, like fart, which really the translation is bullshit. And the verse that he wrote, on the surface, he was praising the Buddha. He said, the golden colored one, the golden complexioned one, which is a phrase referring to Buddha Shakyamuni. Something about the golden complexioned one, seated, with like compassion and wisdom on the lotus seat, so firm and sure that even when the 8 winds blow, he remains unmoving. So on the surface, he's praising the Buddha. But really what he's saying is, I have achieved this unmoving state. So then the Zen master said, oh, not shaken by the 8 winds, but 2 farts blew you all the way across. It's like 2 farts, blew you all the way across the Yangtze River. Oh, he was like, so be careful, when we think, oh, I'm beyond the 8 winds, Yeah, usually 2 farts is enough to get us all worked up, Like, this is not right, this is this is that, Yeah, so. But if you can rest in the view that allows you to see how fear and hope, they are so unreliable. Basically, that's what it is, We don't even have to go to so far to say, oh, fear and hope is not real and all of that. Again, when you study more, you can see how they're not real and so on, But for you and me, I think it's enough to be able to see, they're so unreliable, So what's the big deal? Yeah, something good happening, yes, enjoy it. But also no, it's unreliable. It's going to go away. Right? And when it goes away, are you going to be dragged around by the loss of it? And then when it's here, if it's good, if it's bad, like it's also going to go away. And so in that way, we can taste some measure of freedom from the ups and downs that we come across. Now, again, I don't want you to have this idea that it's kind of somehow kind of bland and boring, kind of like just, yeah, it's because this is only one part, one aspect of it. Just as, with regards to the body, it's a skin bag with 9 holes, but it's also a temple, and it's also Buddha. Yeah? So at each of these levels, certain things are being addressed. And then you develop another level and another level. So the Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, when they all work together, right, you're having the view where you're not moved by all these unreliable happenings of hopes and fears, doesn't render you, kind of like a zombie. Because it's also powered by a Mahayana understanding, and also added with a Vajrayana perspective. All three, all at the same time. So for Mahayana, and kind of briefly, let's look at what Milarepa has to say about the 6 perfections. See, the 6 perfections are traditionally said to be what bodhisattvas fully occupy themselves with, the practice of the 6 perfections. And the classic for bodhisattva, we have great interest in what bodhisattvas are, this and that. At least in the Tibetan tradition, of course, there is the East Asian tradition, China, Japan, and Korea. They have their other kind of great classics on what the bodhisattva way is. And I think if we are interested in this, we should look at what the Buddha actually has to say about it. And this, from the Tibetan and the Indian, late Indian Buddhism, so the Indo-Tibetan tradition, the most important text is the text by Shantideva, called The Way of the Bodhisattva, or Bodhisattva Chayavatara. So as the Dalai Lama says, this is the most influential text for him in his life. The most influential text in his life for him is Shantideva's Bodhichayavatara. So if you want a more extensive, that would be a good one. And Pema Chodron has a very nice commentary. It's called No Time to Lose. So in that commentary, only 9 of the 10 chapters. The chapter on wisdom, she said, I'm not going to touch it. So it's not in that book. That one you can read elsewhere for other commentaries. But here, in a very pithy and direct way of talking about the 6 perfections, is Milarepa, 11th century, one of these wandering ascetics, neither monk nor lay person. When the sister said, I've seen people practicing Dharma, but I've never seen anyone practicing the way you practice. He said, I've seen people practicing the Dharma, they establish monasteries, they have disciples, and they, live kind of acceptable lives, And your own teacher, didn't build a monastery, but he built a family. Right? He married, there's a wife and kids and land and property. Why can't you be like one of those too? And Milarepa said, my teacher is a lion, I'm a jackal. Lions can jump from one mountain to the other mountain. When jackals attempt that, they fall to their deaths. So he said, I don't have that ability. So I wander in the mountains. And so he had eventually he had a band of disciples that will follow him around. He had no interest in settling in one place. And he wasn't very educated in the classical sense. But he received instructions from his teacher, Marpa, and then he meditated a lot. And then all these that came to him is a combination of whatever little he received from his teacher, because he only, I think, studied in a formal way with his teacher for maybe 2 years. That's it. Then, so the rest comes from his own applying of all those instructions and the confidence that comes up. And I think that's also really important, Sometimes, like now, we think, oh, I have a Dharma question. Let me go to Google. Or after Googling, if you're doing your homework, you think, okay, I've done Google. I've Googled everything. I've read everything. I've listened to everything. Now let me go call the teacher to ask. But Milarepa didn't do that. He got a set of instructions from his teachers. Probably most of it wasn't clear to him. And then he applied them. And it wasn't clear. And he struggled, and he struggled, and he struggled. But when he struggled and he struggled, he cleared his own confusion. Now, what Google can tell you, what your teacher can tell you, is basically spoon feeding. And you will never learn. When you most need it, it's not going to be there. It's not going to be there. When you most need it, it's not going to be there. But if you meditate, which literally means habituate that point in your own experience, then it's reliable. It's going to be there. So anyway, Milarepa. So these 6 perfections are basically the perfection of generosity, of moral ethics, of patience, of effort, of meditative stability, and of wisdom. So these are said to be the 6 domains of Bodhisattva's practices. A Bodhisattva has to train in these 6 areas, 6 perfections. So in Shantideva's book, again, this is explained. 4 of these are explicitly identified in Bodhisattva Chayavatara. The first 2 more indirectly. So if you look at Bodhichayavatara, the chapter names, you will find the last 4 explicitly stated. And then the first 2, generosity and ethical conduct, it is said that because that book was basically the writing down of this teaching he gave to his monastic brothers, therefore generosity and ethical conduct was already part of their communal living. And so he did not explicitly address. But what he did explicitly teach are the last 4, which is patience, effort, meditative stability, and wisdom. Just, if you get inspired to go get the book, then just know that the generosity and morality is not explicitly stated there. But here, very nicely, Milarepa says, for generosity, nothing to do other than stop fixating on self. You see, you have an idea of what generosity should be about. I might have my idea of what generosity should be about. Yeah? Other spiritual traditions have ideas about what generosity should be about. Warren Buffett has other ideas of generosity should be about. Even Donald Trump, I'm sure, has his idea of what generosity should be about. Right? If we want to know actually what the Buddha Dharma's understanding of generosity, if you boil it down, distill it down to one word or one phrase, is stop fixating on self. The whole point of practicing generosity is to give up, is to be free from the burden of being fixated on the self. And that's so helpful to understand, that's really what generosity is about. It's not even about, making the other person happy. Not that you should not, from time to time think of that and do that. But the key point of generosity, also, it's not about meeting every person's needs. Because again, if you try to do that without understanding how karma, the law of karma works, then nothing can happen. All of these practices have to be based on understanding. So here, the key point of generosity is to give up fixating on the self. Your identity, your concepts, your insistence, it has to be like this or like that. Think of it, fixation on self is a burden. And until and unless we can see that it is a burden, trying to get rid of that will, point number one, create a lot of suffering. Point number two, will not deliver the result. Because you're trying to get rid of that for the wrong reasons. Only when we can see that fixation on self is a burden, then, it's a lot easier. But if you do it because Buddha says so, worse, your parents told you so, or I'll be a better person. Still, you have to really see that God is so burdensome. Then, people say, how can you give that up? Well, because it's a piece of turd. When you get it that it's turd, then you just give it up. Until you get it that it's turd, then, keep walking around with it, Then, if people run away from you, then, So everywhere you go stinks. Well, you're carrying it around. Of course, no matter where you go, it's going to stink, Then for moral ethics, for morality, he says nothing to do other than stop being dishonest. Be true. Be true. Stop pretending. You see, stop pretending doesn't mean that, you can do the right thing necessarily, but at the very least, it means you stop pretending. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're going to create the cause of suffering, be honest. This is a cause of suffering. And current circumstances are such that I only see this road. At least don't delude yourself. For patience, nothing else to do except not fear what is ultimately true. See? It's like, what is like, And by the way, in this understanding of patience, right? Now understand that these are translations, English translation of what was Sanskrit, right? And with languages, every word has its own kind of semantic field. So it's not going to be exact translation. So another reason, when we learn more languages, we become also more aware of how differently the world is. I often like to say, when I was teaching college, I like to say to my introduction to world religions class, I said, in my opinion, the problems in this world isn't really so much about the fact of not being able to see how similar we are. I know, you're like, what? I think it's not really about the fact that we can't see how similar we are. That one is more like we don't want to see how similar we are. The problem of what we cannot see is the fact that we are different and the inability to accept that we are different. I can tell you every single major war that has been fought, it's because somebody decided that we should all be the same. That along the way, if there's some collateral damage for some utopia, well, too bad, right? For the greater good. And so this kind of view that we are all the same. I said, no, actually, we are so different, and let's see what these differences tell us about the range of human experience. So anyway, here, coming back, it says, what is ultimately true? So back to, sorry, before I lost that point. So here, patience is said to be, or what is called patience here, is said to be the antidote to anger. So now we can see why. So what is anger? Anger is actually the result of fearing what is. Not being able to accept what is gives rise to fear, which then the next step is, when fear is present, then anger or hate turns up. So many good people have become hateful because of fear. Our political climate, so many good people have become hateful. But we forget, according to this, there is one more step: fear. Fear of what? Fear of what is ultimately true. Not being able to accept what is. So, give up fear of what is ultimately true, and patience. You don't need to go concoct patience. In other words, you don't need to go concoct generosity. No contrived generosity is needed. No contrived morality is needed. No contrived patience is needed when you get what Milarepa is pointing to. Give up fixating on yourself, then whatever you do, however big, however small that you give, whether you give time, you give resources, you give kind words, or you give necessary words, all of that is generosity. No question. Conversely, if we don't give up fixation, there's all kinds of things that you can manipulate people by giving them. By giving them stuff, by giving them your time, by giving them whatever. Yeah? All that can be turned into manipulating and controlling your surroundings. That's not generosity. Likewise, like moral ethics, ethical conduct. Ethical conduct can become, right? So much of it is hypocritical, hypocrisy. It's hiding. Back here one face, out there another face. And also it's about, I'm better than you. Right? I don't steal. Well, you are not born in a situation where every day you have to think, should I steal or not steal? So what's so great about you not stealing? Right? Even killing. Great. You were just born in a situation where you're not, every moment going, should I kill or not kill? That doesn't make you a good person. It's just that you are not born into a situation, or you're not put in a situation where that's your constant struggle. So it says, this moral ethical conduct can quickly become a way of, again, asserting your superiority over someone else. But you are not in that person's shoes. What do you know? So it says the true meaning of practicing these moral ethics is stop being dishonest. True meaning of patience is not fearing what is ultimately true. True meaning of effort is to practice continuously. And in the Japanese Zen tradition, there's a good, not very elegant way of putting this. It is said that Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, went to Japan because he had a burning question that he could not answer, which is according to the tradition of Buddhism that he was brought up in, which was Tendai Buddhism. It is said that Buddhahood is innate, that we're innately Buddhists. And then he said, and then over time he's like, well, if we're innately Buddhists, then why do we need to practice? Then of course, then if you say practice is not necessary, then what's all this? Right? So it says that became a stronger and stronger and a stronger question, like this almost an existential crisis. On the one hand, he knows he cannot give up the practice. He understood that. But then how do you reconcile that from you are already Buddha? If you're already Buddha, then there's nothing to practice. Right? So it said that burning question made him leave Japan and go to China, which was a very treacherous journey crossing that sea. Most that cross don't come back, they die. But he comes back. And it said that he came back with the answer. He says, the answer he got in China was, the relationship between practice and attainment, practice and attainment, isn't cause and result. It's a really interesting way of understanding this. He says, the relationship between practice and attainment is essence and expression. The essence is awake. How do you express the essence? Through practice. So practice is no longer a means to an end, but the very practice itself is how you manifest the Buddha nature. Then he says, since the Buddha state is unending, therefore, practice also is necessarily unending. Oh, how elegant. At least for me, I was like, wow, this is really good. So similar here, if you think of effort as, I need to, he's saying, understand that, there's no end. Right? But I would add from Dogen's insight, it's not like, oh God, you got to slave on to no end, no rest for the wicked, No, but because to practice is to simply, it's an act of being awake that you practice. It's how you manifest this awakened state. And therefore, since the awakened state has no end, practice has no end. Effort has no end. Under the topic of effort for Shantideva's chapter in that book, beautiful verses about how he makes it very clear. This effort, a big part of this effort, should really be translated as joyful effort. That it says, if it is done the Bodhisattva way, it's joyful. And also with a lot of courage. He says, some people, at the sight of their own blood, they faint. Others, at the sight of their own blood, they become, great heroes. And are willing to sacrifice themselves for others. Whereas there are those who see their own blood and they faint. Literally, I'm the one. See my own blood and I will pass out. So I kind of get, what he's saying. But he says for bodhisattvas, when they see their own blood, they say, I'm willing to sacrifice this for others. They say, so it comes with courage and it comes with joy. For wisdom, nothing to do other than to know, for meditative stability, nothing to do other than rest in presence. presence is talking about the presence of mind, being present, and resting in it. So, how do you rest in present? In the same way, you have to see how burdensome it is to always be somewhere else mentally. Here, there, here, there, here, there, here, there, here, there, here, there, and never here. If you don't see that, then you're not going to rest. You keep running and thinking that you will finally chase down whatever heck it is that you're chasing down. But when you can rest in the presence of awareness, and this is a meditative point, remaining present in that clear awareness, then that's meditative stability. Wisdom, nothing to do other than to know directly how things are, rather than how they appear to be. The motto for North Carolina: to be rather than to seem. Did y'all know that? Yeah, that's the motto for this state. Pretty good. Although those politicians in Raleigh need to revisit the motto. To be rather than to seem. Seem. Yeah. To be rather than to seem. Seeming truth is another translation for relative truth. Like seemingly things are like that. But they are not like that. They only seem like that. Then from there, be seemly. From this perspective, Milarepa will say, throw that to the winds. Be seemly. He will say, be decent. Be a decent human being. And don't be just seemingly. Just don't be seemly, be decent. That will be Milarepa. The last one, we're not going to go through it here, but if you read this yourself, it's basically the Vajrayana view. All these three is about view, and they don't contradict. And the third one is basically on pure vision, pure perception. So the Vajrayana expression is all appearances are deities, are divine, are Buddha. All sounds are mantra. And all emotions and thoughts are the play of wisdom. One thing, right? All, especially all sounds are mantra. There was a time when I thought it meant I have to train to go like that's a mantra, right? That you have to go superimpose Om Mani Padme Hum on every sound that you hear. No, that's not the meaning of all sounds are mantra. All sounds are mantra is talking about how sounds are pristine. No problem. And that especially means, what we ordinarily consider to be annoying sounds. Country music for some of you. Metal for some of you. All divine. All a mantra. Form? What is form? What is appearances? What is? It's a question. What? No. Appearances are? No, not Vajrayana. Yeah? Mahayana, yes, illusion. In Vajrayana, no. Pristine. Deity. All appearances are deity. All appearances are divine. Not so easy. Then, in concrete ways of training, Vajrayana is going to emphasize you take one person and begin by looking at that person as Buddha, as pure, as pristine. And then from there, it serves as a mirror for you to see yourself as pristine. And that person is the person of the teacher. And that gets all difficult. But it should not be difficult, you know. Now, to start with, Vajrayana already says it's not easy. Nobody said it was easy because this is the pinnacle. And so, somewhere in Vajrayana teachings, it says, you know, the Vajrayana way is like a snake in a tube. You either go up or you go down. There's no other way. They say once you enter Vajrayana, you either go up or you go down. So it's like, watch out. So already it says, you know, like it's not, yeah, it has its dangers. But here's the thing. If you're really driven by a concern, how soon can I wake up so that I can be a reliable guide to others? Then, even if it is dangerous, filled with danger, you have to go. So the motivation for Vajrayana has to be Mahayana. The motivation of Mahayana has to be grounded in the Hinayana. So all three has to work together. We will hear more about this matter, sounds, and thoughts as pristine. And how, what are the different techniques, different teachings, different outlook that you adopt on the Vajrayana level to train in this view. And this view is not separated from all phenomena is empty on the Mahayana. And on the Hinayana, all experiences are characterized by not self, stressful, and uncertain. Those are the three characteristics. This is for those of you in this room. If you miss earlier classes, or you're going to miss some future class, this is being broadcasted on YouTube. And so if you want a link for a particular class, you should send an email to info@udharmanc.com, our main communication email. Send an email there and say that I said, that if you need a particular link, to email there, and then whoever reads it will send you the link. Usually it's Nathan, but not exclusively. Other people are also involved. We are a volunteer organization. We always need volunteers to help with many different things. Some of the things are done behind the scenes, and most of you don't even see that. There's quite a bit to do. Then some are more on the front end of things, especially our weekly volunteers. We try to open Monday to Sunday from noon to 5. Especially in the summer months, it's hard. But at the same time, especially in the summer months, we get people wanting to come in. So if you can do some of these days, you should talk to Larry. Larry will be able to help to schedule you. So that's it. Next week we're not meeting. And then, in case you don't know, we have weekly programs on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday is a meditation class from 7:30 to 8:30, and then Thursday is the open sangha that meets from 7 to 9. Normally 7:30 to 9 on Thursdays. On Tuesday it's 7:30 to 8:30. And then on Wednesday, this slot is taken by the Kagyu Sangha group, those who are training in a specific lineage, Drigum Kagyu more specifically, but we call it the Kagyu Sangha, and that usually meets at this time slot from 7 to 9. Again, thank you for coming. Next week we will not meet, but then the following week we will meet again. Have a good evening.
Yeah, sure. There's the sentence.